this is important, man. Number one, I'm honored and humbled to be here because I've learned from this podcast and others similar to it. So, more importantly, thank you for doing what you're doing, spreading the word, man. I appreciate it.
Let's jump right out the gate. Like you're in a field, I mean, you've a career, a lifer in the NFL. Like that's a position that most of our listeners like would dream of. What is it like? Just, from a 10,000 foot view.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think the first word I describe it, people ask, when they find out what you do, and I always tell them it beats working. It beats having a real job because in the day-to-day life, now with that caveat, there's stressors. It's a high pressure environment, all these other things. But when I actually step back myself and I try to reflect often, I look at what I get to do on a daily basis and I'm like, man, I get to go, I wear gym clothes to work every day for the most part outside of travel, but I get to interact with some of the most unique people, not just elite level athletes, but people who are changing the world with a platform that they have. And I think that's the important thing to point out. Our guys and the women that we work with who have kind of branched their own path into the NFL in the front office, people are changing the world. They're creating opportunities for other people. And what's more important than that? That's why I love the field of strength and conditioning and performance and what we get to do.
What has been the biggest evolution in either the game of football and training people at that highest level? Because like I said, you've been doing it. I mean, a lot has changed in 15 years. So what have you seen?
A great question. There is so much that's changed. At the same time, there's a lot that's similar, funny enough. But within the performance world, I've seen literally sports science come from
Mm.
nothing into building what it is now, where every team is incorporating it in one way or another. So when you look at sports science, the influx, how we're testing athletes, our intake assessments, the amount of data, the millions, literally millions of rows of data I have on every athlete of our team. And then when you look at that and you extrapolate out, and then you're like, all right, how do we clear and not muddy the waters, but dive into what's important and specific to each athlete? That's been awesome because it's game changing. It's helped us train athletes better. It's helped us create health better. It's helped us establish things like BFR protocols, what we do now. It's literally helped us prolong guys' careers. These guys like Jason Kelsey and Andrew Whitworth, Hall of Fame players
Mm-hmm.
who have changed the game. But when I look at the technology and some of the things that have come in, Justin, they have helped us literally extend these guys' careers. And that's what's important because those guys are changing the game.
You talked about the sports science, and the thing that I wrote down here was like, how do you personally make sure that guys don't become a science project when they don't want, like, they're probably surveyed out and technologied out because, from the outside looking in, everybody was giving you and the Philadelphia Eagles a ton of credit because it's Jalen and Saquon were squatting. And they're like, look, a fantastic team. They're doing the basics. Like, how do you balance that duality?
Well, number one, the foundation has to be established, and the basics are never going to die. That's part of what's still similar. That's the foundation of strength training and performing at an elite level. You need strength, you need power, you need explosiveness, you need all these fundamental elements. Those have to be there. That has to be the staple of your program. I firmly believe that. But then the science, how do we get to the point? Because I've screwed this up, I'll be the first to admit, because when it first came in, and you start to look at, all right, force plate, 1080, throw it all in, give me it all. I want data. I'm never going to turn down data. But at the same time, you got to start slowly. Like drinking out of a fire hose does not work. So for us, let's turn down that water pressure a little bit. Let's narrow the focus on, all right, let's just learn the force plate. Let's look at neuromuscular fatigue patterns. Let's look at how we can maybe establish a force velocity curve based on body weights and then overlap that maybe with a DEXA scan or something like that. Let's start simple and let's build from that. So when we start simple, we build on, and then you can eventually get a little bit more complicated. And the most important thing, this whole aspect, is communicating with the players. When this started to come in, this is specific to my time. When I started with the LA Rams, they had not had a historical relevance with sports science at that point. So we came in and we introduced a lot of new technologies. The first thing I said to the team and each individual player, especially the key guys, the big time, the leaders, I said, guys, if there's something that becomes such a pain that you guys hate doing it, you feel like it's a test, that's another caveat of mine. I don't want it to feel like a test. If you get to that point, tell me. I will literally take this $50,000 technology and throw it away because that's not worth it to me. The data that I get from a subjective feedback standpoint is still the most important thing that I can get from any athlete. So communicate, clear, open, honest communication has to be at the forefront, whether we're talking sports science, data, football, life. Clear, open, honest communication has got to be established number one.
Anybody that's listening to that, I think they need to really just emphasize, like, rehear the fact that you said it's qualitative. Like in the research world, hearing somebody where it's not just numbers, numbers is quantitative, but having that survey, that's qualitative. And the fact that you're doing that mixed methods, like, bravo to you for that, because I feel like the pendulum has shifted too far where it's like, oh, well, the numbers say it. It's like, well, wait a minute. The numbers is coming from a person, and that person has feelings, and their perception drives their reality.
I love that. That's a phenomenal. I'm going to steal that. So thank you, because it is. If you don't talk to the players, man, you only get a half of the cup of really what's going on there. When you actually look, I love context. I can't get context if I'm not communicating with the players. That's why one of my favorite things that we collect is subjective wellness. Because when you get the trust established through vulnerability and through years and consistency, players start to really become honest. And when I can get a wellness questionnaire to tell me everything I need to know, that's all the sports science I need. Now, do we still collect? Absolutely. But that is what I really lean heavily on, because it establishes follow-up conversations and questions and allows me to dive down deeper to get that context to the next layer. And then I can eventually say, all right, now I know the full story. Now I can make a key, accurate decision for what's most applicable to this athlete.
From somebody that's had hard time getting guys to be honest and not be like, oh, what did you say this was? Like, how do you just ask guys in isolation? Like, how are you able to get people to truly give you that honest feedback? Because what we used to do is originally we would ask and let them say it out loud, and players would hear it. And then eventually we'd just be like, point to the number on this, so that way nobody can see what you pointed to.
Yeah, I think you're there. Now, this is a deep layered question in psychology, right? So it goes, every athlete's different, because I've had athletes that are fine with shouting out their answer and being brutally honest, but I've had a lot more where it's, hey, come here, can you fill this out? And it's private, it's on an iPad or it's on a piece of technology where no one else is going to see it. But I've been in sports, or I've been in buildings where coaches want it posted and plastered. And I'm like, coach, there's certain things that we can lay out there as a team. And I'm all for accountability. It's one of my personal core values. I want accountability. But if we start to do it through an embarrassment level and things like that, you're going to get a negative response. So what I've found, every athlete's different. You have to establish what motivates those athletes, and then it takes time. I think people want to skip. I know this. People want to skip the process. If you want to skip right to the point where an athlete trusts you, don't expect that on day one. Don't even expect it in year one, Justin. I've had that where it's taken me literally years, and it's through repetitive, consistent, my own vulnerability. Like, I'm going to give you my trust because I fully expect that you're going to do what I asked you to do. We're going to build this partnership. Don't trust me day one. I tell all my athletes that I'll earn your trust through time and through consistency. That's what I expect. And then once we've established that, then we have trust. Once you have trust, you can fully expect. I've had some messed up conversations where guys trust me too much, Justin, but I haven't shared that information with anybody else because they do trust me. So that's what I like, man. It's more, 99% of my day is sitting there almost in a therapy session where guys are bringing stuff, and it's dealing with that emotional complexity of individuals. That's the humanity of it.
You talked about, you talked about trust there. You talked about guys like Jason and Andrew, who, like you said, are revolutionary. Not only I'm biased because I played offensive line and they're
Yep.
offensive linemen, but when a young player, and that's what I'm trying to get to, when a young player comes in the league, and there's rookies around now, and they see that relationship that you have with the vets, that has to instantly help too, though, right? Speed up the process for them.
Oh, 100%. And one of the first things I tell, if you're an incoming rookie, I say establish yourself within the room, find the vet or the veterans, and start to follow them along. Learn, ask questions. One of the best things we can be is curious, especially if you're a rookie in the NFL. Don't come in banging your chest and saying, my ego tells me I'm supposed to be here. You should be confident. Don't be egotistical about it, though. If you're an offensive lineman, you walk into the Philadelphia Eagles, you got Jason Kelsey, you got Lane Johnson, you got some of these guys that have done
Yeah.
it for years and years and years. The first thing I'm doing is going to ask those guys, what's your daily process? Like, how have you done this for so long? And I think that's part of the mission. You got to be able to go ask, put your ego aside, and say, I can learn from this guy.
That makes me feel better, because one of the guys that I work with at Towson, he got an undrafted free agent deal with the Titans. And I was like, listen, I know Armani Hooker. We work together at Iowa. Go shadow him and just do whatever he's doing. Like, get in his pocket and learn from them, because you want to learn what people in the NFL are doing, go be around them and do what they do. If you're looking to train your athletes in person or remote, you need to make sure that you're utilizing TeamBuildr. I have had TeamBuildr since 2019 and still utilize it with my remote athletes. This makes everything simple, from the ability to program, have videos right there, wellness questionnaires. Loved being able to have it in person at the rack at Towson, and being able to have it in person now at Goldfinch. This has made my life easier as a coach. If you're still printing on paper, I don't know what you're doing. If you have a different software company, again, I don't know what you're doing. Check out TeamBuildr down in the link below.
No doubt. And the funny thing, it's no different in life. I've been,
No.
some of the businesses, the elite level CEOs and people who have built billion-dollar businesses that I've been around and known, they have done the same thing. They go out and they research, who can I learn from? We are all lifelong learners. I think when you skip that step, or when you think that you're too good for that, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So whether you're a rookie in the NFL, whether you're a college freshman, wherever you are in your journey, go learn from someone who's done it and is doing the things that you want to do in a couple of years.
In your 15 years, you can not name names, but like, what have been some of the traits of those that came in the NFL and did the best job of like actually doing it? And what were some of those traits that they did outside of, listening to somebody? Was there some certain characteristics, so that way our coaches that are listening can try to instill that in their college athletes when they get them before they go to the NFL?
Yeah, I love this question because I think it's important. Whether you're a coach or a player, you should probably have your core values, or at least a set of things, characteristics that you want to live by. For us, the best teams that I've been on, and we definitely do this in Philadelphia, we establish what does it mean? What's an identity of a Philadelphia Eagle? Here are the trademarks. Here are the characteristics. I'll name names in a second, but some of the things, coachability is number one. Once again, going back to that humility piece, those guys, the elite level guys, Calvin Johnson's one of the first guys that comes to mind. Aaron
Yeah.
Donald, the guys that are literally potentially the best ever at their
Yes.
positions, and Dominican Sue, they wanted coaching. They sought out the guys that were going to challenge them and the girls that were going to challenge them. They seek out hard coaching. And then number two, they show up and they do the work. There's no excuses. Calvin Johnson came to me one time. This is a vivid thing that I'll probably never forget. And I showed him, it was the old school Cassie Phillips trigger point therapy release. And I showed him the soleus into the gas arc. Like, I showed him this 30-minute complex lower extremity soft tissue pattern. Calvin did that every day from that day forward for like the next 5 years, because it was like midway point through his career. He did it every day. He would show up in the morning, spend extra time, get to the facility early. You talk about coachability, and then applicating that into your daily process, and then consistency. Consistency to me is one of the truest measurements of performance. Every elite level Hall of Fame caliber athlete I've been around have been some of the most consistent people that I've ever seen in my life. And that's what I try to model my life on that. If you can be consistent, show up every day and do the work, that's going to lead you to long-term success. So those are some of the things. And then obviously leadership and some of the things, their growth mindset. So for me, you have to be able to show up. You want to get better, but that ties into the coachability. Tough, you got to love the sport. For me, toughness is a huge component. As you go into life, whatever you're going to do, you're going to hit setbacks. That's why I love football. The stumbling blocks you come into, you can look at two ways: obstacles or opportunities. The guys that are truly tough and mentally tough and grounded and have a growth mindset, they're going to look at it as, hey, this might be a really bad situation. I'm going to grow from it. What can I take from this? I'm going to lean into it. I'm not going to run away or shy away. I'm going into this thing. I'm going to dive in. I'm diving in full speed.
I mean, and you've seen some of the, like you literally did say, some of the best at every position. And like, if something as simple as Calvin Johnson listening, like, coaches, keep emphasizing the little details, because that will stick with them. I mean, you just heard an example of it right there.
No doubt. The details matter. Details matter. I was 1%. A lot of people use that and coin that. I firmly believe it, because if you can take an elite level athlete, especially, and gain 1%, that is career altering. If you're dealing with high school level athletes, I've coached at high school level. I love it. You're talking about 5-10%. The amount of
Yeah.
gains that you can get from a high school level and a high school aged athlete, just think about the impact those details are going to have when they are in college, or when hopefully they are at the professional level. That's incredibly impactful.
So we had Coach Justin Lovett on the show, and obviously he's at the Rams now after you went to go to Philadelphia, and he was talking about working with Aaron Donald, and somebody that wants to do more, and like you almost kind of have to do what they're asking you to do because they want to do more, and they're at a higher they earn more money than you, and that's happening in the world of NLI, and the ability to know, like, okay, this is what I want to do, but I have to give you what you want to, be able to appease what you want so you feel good enough to play. Like, again, that's just such a tough position that I don't think everybody understands. Like, can you talk about that duality and that balancing role? Because you want to help them, you don't want to undertrain them, you don't want to overtrain them, but like, y'all are riding on a razor thin line.
Yeah, and it's a fine balance. I would say this, it's a marriage and it's an integration, not necessarily a balance, because in a marriage there's
Hmm.
compromise, there's negotiation. In an integration there's compromise, there's negotiation. So I'm not going to say it's like negotiating with a terrorist, but I would say like guys like Aaron Donald who are built in a certain way and it's what's made them great. Jason Kelsey is very similar. Those are the guys where it's taken years. Those aren't the guys where it's 1 week and bam. I was very fortunate. I actually played with Aaron Donald's older brother Archie at the University of Toledo. And the funny side story, Archie used to tell me, he was like, dude, just wait till you see me. I was like, he can't be that good. He's that good. So Aaron's AD is a maniac. His workouts are insane. Like the season ends and he goes literally right back into working out. He's spending 3 hours a day training hard where other people don't last in his workouts. So that was part of it. But understanding and saying, all right, what do you feel like you need? Because there was a psychological component
Yes.
for him to know that he had done more than everybody else. I'm like, all right, I don't want to take that away because that's important and that's what makes you up. So when we do this, let's fill that bucket. But on the days where we fill that bucket, let's build out the calendar. Let's build out the schedule so that we have at least 1 or 2 of these days where we do allow your system to downregulate. You got to reload, you got to recover. And then we can actually take that day and ramp it up a notch. You're going to get more out of the next day. But this is the integration. This is the compromise. I don't want to take away anything. I'm just going to add the other buckets so that you can actually do more of what you feel like you need. And Kelsey was the same thing where we built this workload maintenance and we built like a tier management system is kind of how I've operated with loading the entire team. And then you bucket within a tier system. That's how I've looked at our guys because we deal with guys from, rookies, 20-year-old rookies to I've had 40-year-old veterans. So you look at that, that's a wide balance. So we tier every player based on injury history, age, training history, a number of factors. And then part of that was the education. A guy like Jason Kelsey is one of the smartest individuals I've ever been around. So he's going to see through BS. So bringing in Kelton and saying, hey, here's what we're ultimately trying to get to. He's like, all right, that still took time, even after you lay out the facts, because he has to feel it. He has to live it. He has to experience it. But once again, that's why I look at it as it's a partnership. It's a collaboration. This is a marriage so that we need to compromise on some things, which I need to do too. I can't always expect compromise coming from the other side. So it's putting that ego aside. Ultimately, we're both in this for the same thing. I want the best for the player who's going to give us the best for the team. And ultimately, everyone wins when you look at it from that perspective.
How'd you stay positive in those days where you're like, man, I just feel like I'm not making progress with these guys?
Great question. Therapy. No, it's called friends. It's called colleagues. And it's like, hey man, have you ever had a player like this? Because at this point I've experienced a lot, but there's still things that pop up day to day where I think, who can I call? And everyone has that inner circle. I think I would encourage every coach to have that. You need a couple people you can call on the great days, but you can especially call on those days where you're going through some challenges and you're like, hey, I'm going through this. How would you handle this? Just getting outside perspectives. I think you always balance those things, and that goes back into that growth mindset. I don't always know the answer, and when I don't, I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to take a big step back, detach, say who can I call, who has lived through. Sometimes it's not even a coach it might be a guy who went through the military. It might be a guy with a completely different perspective. But I'm like, hey, you've been in contract negotiations like this. How would you handle someone who has this viewpoint? We can learn from so many different avenues. Is not setting yourself into one narrow path. Broaden your horizons a little bit and try to learn from anybody.
And anybody that's seen what you've been doing, you've been broadening your horizons. You've been able to go out and see the world, and that's awesome for you. And how did all of that happen? Because I mean, kudos to you for being able to do that and see the world and learn, so that way you can then apply it with your athletes.
No, I appreciate it, man. And it's been something, it's intentional. And I think even going back, I've tried to get a little bit more active on social media and bridge out because a lot of people have asked me, you know the deal, you know the schedule. It's been hard. So I've always said no. Now I'm starting to say yes to a few more, whether it's a speaking opportunity or going and learning from a company, even like doing keynotes in certain areas where I'm like, yeah, but if I do this, I can learn from that company and how you've dominated this industry. There's crossover and there's parallels. But when I look back and rewind earlier in my career, my wife she thinks it's funny, but this is a point where we used to schedule our vacations. And then the side, I'm like, hey, where do you want to go on vacation? She'll pick a place or we'll discuss and come up with one. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking I could go to IMG if we go to Sarasota, Florida. I can go visit the. I'm setting it up to where I'm like, all right, honey, I need like 2 hours. I'll do it in the morning while you're still sleeping, or you go to the spa or whatever. But I'm going to go sharpen my sword too, because I know that there's all these resources at your fingertips. The most important thing we can do is ask and reach out. So I'm trying to say yes more when people do ask for certain things like that. But man, I've learned so much from so many people. I honestly do think you can learn something from everybody that you encounter.
What's been one of the top, like, I don't want to narrow you down to like number one. So maybe there is one, but what's been like, some of the top things that you've learned during this off season that you want to then apply with whether it be the team that you work with, like your subordinate leader coaches, or with the players? Hawkin Dynamic is the best option if you're trying to get any force plate data or if you're trying to collect any isometric mid thigh pulls. Not only can you do isometric mid thigh pulls for the lower body, but I call it an isometric mid thigh pull for your upper body, where you're able to do an isometric push up into something where your back is pushing into a bar and your hands are on the force plate. I utilized Hawkins force plates and Hawkins software when I was at Towson. Still utilize it now when I'm at Goldfinch. If you're using the other competitors, I don't know what you're doing. Hawkins customer service is second to none. Hawkins software and their hardware, again, second to none. Check them out in the link down below.
Yeah, I could go a lot of angles. There's the first one that popped into my mind when you were asking that. We talked about it earlier offline, but we had talked about the NFL summit. So we did this health and player safety summit, and I was fortunate to be a part of the planning board. So we planned this as a committee for about a year. Our
Jeez.
keynote that we started off on the first collaborative day was General Fenton. General Fenton is in charge of all of SOCOM. So every special forces operation, every special forces unit in the United States military, I think it's about 70,000, he is directly responsible for. So all Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Green Beret, everybody. Like this guy deals with the elite of the elite. So you talk about having influence and understanding operating at a high level. So talking to him, learning about the after action review process that those guys go through at every level, including the leadership. There's no rank to an idea. There's no rank to a criticism. And
Ooh.
for them, they don't look at it as criticism. They look at it as accountability and ownership. And what's happened over years and years of doing this, they have found that when they get to that after action review, it could be a training exercise or a real life mission for us, a game, a practice, whatever, you go into it. They have found that now you can't even get to the point where you can call somebody out because that person's already taken critical ownership of it and said, guys, I screwed this up. Here's how I'm going to fix it. And then you watch them put into action everything that they said, because there's a big difference between saying, I screwed up, guys, sorry, and then never putting forth action and actually fixing it. Those guys put immediate action to it and they fix that thing immediately. And that's when you hear people that do what they do for a living talk about that, Justin, like being blown away doesn't even describe it. So I think that's one of the best lessons I could learn from someone. I've been to Coronado and seen the SEALs and how they operate, just the mindset, but that accountability and that ownership is something that I think everybody can do a better job of. I know me personally, but I think everybody can do a better job of that.
I mean, shoot, hearing you say that, it's like, yeah, imagine being the sport coach in a film session, and it's like that you don't even have to break down the mistakes because, like, all right, the right tackle's like, yeah, guys, like, okay, the play comes up, hey, man, all right, this is what I did wrong. This is how I could have done better. I need to make sure I'm stepping with my inside foot instead of my, like, it just makes for a better experience for everybody.
No question. And it's accountability, but self accountability. I think everyone talks about accountability and they look at call people out. Yeah, but call yourself out first. At the end of the day, look at yourself critically in the mirror, ask yourself a few prompted questions, which I always love to do. Like, what did you screw up? Who do you need to apologize to? What's one good thing? What's a positive growth mindset thing? Or what's a negative growth aspect from your previous 24 hours that you need to fix?
That, like, hearing you say that about the accountability made me think back to somebody, I forget who it was. They said it to me like 2 or 3 years ago, where it's like, there's not a problem with accountability. It's almost like the frequency and duration of it. Like, how often are you having to be accountable to your teammates? Because, like, yes, you should have to, you're your brother's keeper, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you're always having to hold somebody accountable, it's like, man, at what point do you need to cut ties with that individual because they're toxic for the team? No?
Yeah, 100%. And there's a fine line. Once again, it's a balance, but it's an integration, like grace. Giving people
Hmm.
grace when they do make mistakes from a leadership perspective, I'm talking more than anything, it's an important quality. But repetitive grace through the same mistakes, that's enablement. If I'm constantly
Ooh.
correcting the same mistakes, well, then maybe I need to start correcting the person who's making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So I think there's a balance there, but you have to look at how much is too much. Absolutely. That's a good point.
You talked about the PFPCA, Professional Football
Performance Coach
Performance
Association.
Coaches Association. All right, I did like I wrote the acronym down, but I didn't write down the name of it because I thought I'd be able to remember it. Let's talk a little bit about that for anybody that might not be familiar with the organization. And I mean, you're the president of it. Like you're you did plan it, but you're also very high up on it. Let's explain that to everybody so they understand what you guys are working on with that.
Yeah, really important organization. We formed a little bit over a year ago. So we're a nonprofit organization. We basically oversee, our membership consists of all strength and conditioning coaches, all performance directors, all sports scientists within the NFL community. And it's something we've talked about potentially branching out. But as we formulated this, one of our big steps was to get the collaborative summit together. So that health and player safety summit came together, and we were one of the four entities within that. That's a big part of the NFL. That's a big part of the derivative. What our end goal is, number one, we want to promote health and safety of the game because obviously we've all been impacted positively from the game. So how can we give back to the community, create better health and safety for our players, create a better product for the fan? Overall, that's the determining factor. Are we doing everything that's good for the player? Are we helping establish better performance, elite performance? Because there's two outcomes: protecting the athlete from a health standpoint, that's obviously that's a critical factor. But then on the other side of that, how do we create better performance? We all want to see more touchdowns or higher score, but also we're in charge of both those key concepts. Obviously, the sports medicine staff comes into play extremely significantly. So building that collaborative nature where we're working with them, the other entities that were at this summit were the equipment managers and then the dietitians, because we all work in collaboration and our end goal is to create a better game. So how do we do that? Number one, we have to do that through collaboration. So we have some initiatives going in. We're establishing a couple different task force within it for sports science and some other things. But a lot of our membership are on task force for the NFL, so that helps obviously establish parameters, but also a voice within the NFL so that we can give ideas when maybe we're making big changes or we're making decisions based on international travel or schedule increases, things like that. So just having an impact and giving our expert opinion in ways like that. Then the other side, being a nonprofit, we want to give back. We want to give back to the community. Our long-term goals: establishing scholarship paths, establishing internships, establishing paths for people to get a job or get a foot in the door so that we can actually start to promote the brand, but also the profession as a whole.
Hearing, you talked about the athletic trainer thing, and I strangely enough, I had a text from one of my buddies that I used to work with at Towson, and he said that strength and conditioning coaches are light years ahead. And this is his words. This is not mine or you. He said that strength coaches are light years ahead with our conferences and our podcasts and things that we talk about, just in terms of, collaborating and knowledge. And I said to him, I was like, that's fascinating to me. I didn't think that at all because, from the outside looking in, it seems like the athletic training profession's been around for a while. I'm saying all of this to then ask you, what's your advice on best practices to collaborate with athletic trainers, to work with, to then ultimately promote the best outcome for the athletes that you work with, and then our listeners to do the same?
The first and probably most important bit of advice I can say, and this goes into life, but especially the relationship between performance and athletic training: remove your ego. And I'm speaking to myself more than anyone else, because when there's been a historic, I don't want to call it conflict, but there has been obviously conflict within the two areas to where, you're both in similar areas but different. And I think strength and conditioning, strangely enough, has been, you're a hybrid. You're a coach sometimes, you're not a
Yeah.
coach other times. So we live in this weird, delicate balance of a world. So I think finding a way to come together, and once again, the ultimate path is to get to a point where we're doing what's best for the players and what's best for the team. We both have the same goal in mind. I think establishing those commonalities, removing the ego and saying, how can we? It's almost similar to, once again, a marriage or a partnership. When you start to look at problems where it's us versus them or them versus us, you're never going to come through task conflict resolution. You're never going to come to a better point. For us, when you come into it, it's got to be, look, it's us versus this problem. When you look at it like it's you and this group or that group, it's everybody against a problem. You can start to shift. You can start to pull resources and say, we're going to attack that problem and we're going to dominate it because me and you are way better than me versus you. And this is going to give a better outcome to our players and our staff.
one of those groups that I thought of was the dietitians, and we've had a couple on the show before, and they're like, listen, you think it's hard being a strength coach? Everybody thinks they're a nutritionist because they all eat. Like, how do you
Yeah.
then help speak life into and help support your nutritionists and dietitians? Because as I said, we've had them on the show, and they've been like, yeah, I mean, trying to figure this piece out as strength coach, nutritionist is obviously very critical. What have you done, and then what do you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, same thing with this summit. It was critically important that we made sure they were involved. So Sarah Snyder's the president of their organization. She's with the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah,
Sarah,
Sarah. Yeah, that's
she's
crazy.
awesome. So Sarah's phenomenal. And going through bringing them along, us trying to get in, and everyone trying to come together. The most important thing was it was me, Sarah, Brendan Berger, who's the president of the equipment managers, and Brian Engel, we call him Flea, who's with the Packers. He's with the Athletic Trainers Association. Getting everybody together, it was us four meeting consistently, and we've done that for the past year. There were other people involved in that too, but as we did it, it was making sure we're on the same page, and then we're deflecting that leadership down. We're delegating down. We're like, hey, everyone, this is why this is critically important. We're going to get everyone in one room, but the dietitians are such a huge part of that. But to your point, Justin, they've been kind of the odd person left out because
Yes.
they're a smaller group. There's less of them, so they don't have this big voice, and they haven't been established as long. So I think it's just important. We got to get them involved. We got to get them involved in the conversations that are going on immediately.
And so this is my words, and I said this to somebody. I was like, well, I mean, it's kind of like velocity based training is important to use with your athletes. However, you want to make sure you're using VBT at the right time with the right athletes. That's why you need to get in touch with the folks at Vitruve. At Vitruve, they're going to be able to help you with the proper tools to monitor VBT, but they're also going to be able to make sure that you're using it properly. It is often misunderstood, and that is why the folks at Vitruve will make sure that the tools that you use from them are accurate and they're reliable, but also making sure that you're implementing it with the right athletes. Check out Vitruve in the link down below. Nutritionists are at the point now, dietitians, nutritionists are at the point where strength and conditioning coaches used to be like trying to get a foothold because I still see it mainly in football. And I'm not saying you, or I'm not saying any of the other coaches, but in my experience, I've seen coaches that don't want to let the nutrition thing go. And it's like, remember, as a strength coach, the sport coach probably didn't want to let the weight room go, but they did. And they trusted you. Like, speak life into and empower the nutritionist so you can delegate it and you can focus and you can play in the sandbox together. Like, that's what I'm trying to speak into for our listeners right now. And it seems like you're in agreement.
1,000%, because I love that analogy too. The football coaches versus the strength coaches. If you shift back 20, 30 years ago, I guarantee it was the same exact battle. That's a great question that I'm going to ask some of the older guys because that's a great way to look at it. But right now, sports science, I would almost put in a similar basket where there's a lot of strength coaches that want to hold on to that because
Yes.
this is my baby, this is mine. But eventually, this person is way more qualified. He or she is going to take this and make it even better. And I look at the dietitians the same. When I look at early in my career and I was handling all of that because the rules were different in the league and not every team employed a full time. I don't want all that. I can't because that spreads you, number one, too thin. But I know I'm not the best I want the best of the best. Give me Sarah Snyder. Give me the best people to dominate that aspect of the role, and then I can shift focus over to something else that's going to help our team. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. But I think once again, that comes from ego. If you want to keep all these things to yourself, start to look at yourself and be like, am I doing this for the right reasons or am I doing this for a selfish reason?
Whether you'll admit it or not, I will. Like, you clearly don't have an ego. You're able to deflect it. How did you get to that point in your life, in your career? Because ideally, I'd like more and more coaches, myself included, to rub off on that and have that, because that is not, quote unquote, how I was raised in strength and conditioning. And maybe other coaches weren't raised that way too. What was any experiences that was maybe an aha moment for you? Cause you were like, okay, maybe you weren't always this humble, or like, I want you to talk about that in your own journey because there's power in it. And I want more coaches to start to emulate that.
Well, I appreciate it first and foremost, and I'll correct you. I do have an ego. We all have an ego. So we're,
we
but
all have that voice inside of us that's like,
yeah,
you can stop, you've done enough. Like, yeah.
there's no doubt. So it's a daily fight, honestly. And I think the first and foremost, the most important thing is we talk about it, identify it. This is like, hey, listen, for me, it's self-talk too. It's why did I make this decision? I'm a huge Jocko Willing fan. I always take the detachment. I try to detach in my life but I kind of look at it a little bit different. It's zoomability for me. So I like to zoom into a situation, zoom out rapidly. That's an integration. There's a dichotomy there. You have to be able to do both, especially as you grow in your leadership roles. So for me, when I'm in the heart of it and I know that emotions are involved because we're emotional creatures, we're humans, and it might be a conflict and it might be this person wants this, but I want that. And I think this is best. They think that's best. All right, let me zoom out literally in the second where I take a breath, not physically step back, but step back, from the situation, look at it and try to analyze, am I making the decision because of my ego? Am I acting emotionally right now? And just taking that quick breath, taking that quick step back and trying to practice that occasionally, that's gotten me into the path where I've repped it enough times. It's become kind of a second aspect to where I don't have to think about it. I just do it. And that's allowed me to save myself in a lot of situations where if I would have just reacted emotionally, I probably would have said something I would have later regretted. It would have increased the conflict. It wouldn't have helped the team, because at the end of the day, if once again, the star of the team is the team. And if we look at it, we all take that grasp, like we're trying to do this for the team and for the other people that are a part of this. Being a part of something that's bigger than ourselves is way more important than whatever we're trying to get out of this thing. So I've been fortunate to be around a lot of good leaders who have exhibited that, and stealing from those guys and girls and being able to learn from everyone I've come into contact. But it's still a daily battle. I think that's why don't be shy. Let's talk about it. We all deal with egos. How can we be better in those emotional moments where we're not overreacting and we're doing what's better for the team?
And I mean, you clearly have been able to do that in that. And what I'm now going to be vulnerable and speak into is, for me, like the whole notion of being a get back coach. That was always something that bothered me. And you've been on ESPN films talking about NFL films, whatever it was. And how did you handle that role? B, what is your advice to people? C, I'm going to publicly apologize for how much I disliked it and how I spoke about it. And I was, it was always so tough for me, because it's like, yes, I want to help the team. And okay, if this is something to help the team, but if that's a person at the top of the organization that is supposed to be preaching discipline, but like, so I've always had a hard time with that. And instead of being a mature adult about it and talking with somebody like you, I didn't. So that's one of the things, apology, but then also, what is your advice to coaches that are either feeling a way that I felt, and just speak into that?
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it first. So thank you. As I look back at that time, it's funny because I think we all live in our own little world. For me, when I saw a lot of funny reactions, I saw a lot of positive reactions because that video blew up and I don't know how many millions of people saw it. But then I saw the negatives. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Because for me, I never looked at it that way. And I'm the person in it. So I have the full context of it, because if I'm looking at it from that perspective, I'm like, well, no, this is how me and Sean came into this situation. This is why it eventually became what it was. Because when it first happened, and Sean McVay is one of the best leaders I've ever been around. I
Exactly.
absolutely love that guy. I tell him that every time I talk to him. I love him. He is one of my favorite people. He's meant more to my family and everyone around me. Like, I can't say enough good things about him. So we communicated about everything. Sean was 31 at the time. I'm 32, 33. We're both the youngest at what we do. So we feel there's a lot of pressure on you. You guys aren't going to succeed. You're never, and we didn't have, they were 4-12 the year before we got there. No one really had any expectations. So when we went into it, we talked about everything. We became very close. We met every morning. We'd work out together, and we got really close because we had similar views on life, leadership, just everything. So when we got to the point when games were coming up, it was probably training camp, and we were probably getting close to our first preseason game, if I remember right. And me and Sean were talking. I said, hey, how are you on game day? And it was kind of one of those conversations. I was asking him, I was like, hey, bro, are you going to be cool? Or are you going to be one of those guys? I was like, I've dealt with those guys. He was like, no, I'm pretty calm on game day. He's like, I'll get on the official occasionally, but not bad. All right, great. He said, the one thing I need help with, though, when I'm locked in, because he's our offensive play caller at the time, he still is. He's calling plays. He is so locked in. He is in no way, shape, or form thinking about anything else other than the play clock, getting the correct play called, any adjustments that need to be made. He's talking to the quarterback up to 15 seconds when the communication's cut off. So he's in it. And he said, bro, whatever you need to do, just make sure that I don't get a penalty. I said, all right, Sean, I'm going to physically grab you. If you're good with it, I'm going to get you out of the way. He said, whatever you need to do. So by the time, I think when that film came out, it was our second year. We went to the Super Bowl that year. That was second nature. We didn't think about it. It was me. I'd pick him up and move him out of the way. And I was more fatigued at the end of the game, Justin, than I think half of our players, because I'm so emotionally locked into where's the official, and I'm trying to make sure that we don't get a penalty. But when I took on that role, I didn't think twice because I was saving a 15-yard penalty every time that I stepped in to do that. If I have to look stupid to save our team from potentially a game-losing penalty, I will look stupid till I'm blue in the face. So I think I looked at it in a full context like that. I'm like, this is what we need to do to help the team succeed. I'm willing to do a lot of things to help our team succeed.
No, I mean that it makes a ton of sense, and that's where part of me, like, I fully hear that, and I'm like, yes, that makes sense. I agree with it. And then the other part of my head is like, okay, well, what, like, how much of it, and I still remember seeing who was it, gosh, it was when Bill O'Brien was at the Texans. I'll never forget one of their the Hard Knocks. He was like, listen, coaches, I know what you know in practice. Don't coach the players. If they make a mistake, let them make the mistake. So, like, obviously in a game it's different, and that's where, like, for me, I'm just trying to, again, best understand it to ultimately succeed. But I mean, again, you guys have achieved success. You're talking Super Bowls, you're talking, winning very far. So I mean, I need to just start to, understand that it is what it is. And when you're trying to make a play call and there's everybody's preparing and they're getting so good at disguising coverages, and when you're trying to call the perfect play, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it. So once again, I've never been a head coach. I've never had to play call. I've never had to play call in an NFL environment. It's stressful. I've seen those guys, and it's like Sean is. I'm not going to call him a problem. He's very locked into one part. That's one of the very few flaws he has. I've been around other guys that are just nut jobs, and those are the guys where I'm like, just have more composure and make sure that you're not putting the team in a bad place by something you say to a player, to a coach,
Yeah.
to an official. Those are the ones where I'm like, all right, that's more of an emotional response. But I see both sides because it is. Jim Caldwell used to say the same thing. He used to go to our coaches
Okay.
and say, listen, at the time I worked with a guy named Jason Arapoff. If Ted or Jason has to tell you more than once to get back, he said, I'm going to fire you eventually. He said, because if you don't know where to stand, you're a grown man. He said, then I don't know what else you're screwing up. He said, because if you cannot, there's a white line, don't step on the white line. It can't get more clear cut than that. And it was funny how he did it because I've seen every coach address it differently, but it is something that I see both sides because
Yeah.
there's some discipline involved in there too.
Are you expanding and need more equipment inside your current room? Or are you building a new weight room and you need to get some equipment? You need to look no further than Powerlift. I had Powerlift equipment when I was at Harvard, Iowa, and at the University of Maryland. I'm currently utilizing their stuff right now. I'm telling you, Powerlift strong, Powerlift made here in America, here in the great state of Iowa, made, manufactured. You have the ability for customization, whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the upholstery, whether it's on the bumpers, across the rack. There are countless options, making sure it's designed to your specific brand. It's Powerlift made, it's Powerlift strong, it's not cheap like all the other competitors. And the people inside of Powerlift are people that you want to be with. Check them out in the link down below. So hearing you talk about the stress and the health, how did you then try to help coaches, because obviously you need players and the coaches, like, how did you try to help them with their health and their eating and their sleeping routine? Because you can get very sucked into it when you're game planning, and if you're on a short week, and like, how do you then try to help them? Because you said, and I'm familiar with Jocko stuff too, like, there is power in detachment. Like, how did you try to either speak life into that, or hey, let's get a lift in, or hey, let's eat this, and do it in a respectful and building that relationship way?
Yeah, I love that because the negative side of the NFL, I've seen this unfortunately too many times, guys who have gained 20, 30 pounds through the course of a season, a 6, 7 month season, and their health just deteriorates and they're stress eating and they're not sleeping. They're sleeping at the office for 3 hours, waking up and grinding again. That side is always it's bothered me because I'm like, all right, number one, you got to show up and be the best you for your players. If you're coaching the tight ends or the offensive line, you need to show up and be your best. You're not doing that if you're 20 pounds overweight, you're unhealthy, you're stressed out, you're sick. So when I was a young assistant, I look back now and I didn't do this intentionally. I wasn't smart enough, but I would have like practice squad workouts or certain aspects of the week. I'd invite all the coaches. We would get 3, 4, 5 coaches that would jump in, but that's one extra day of exercise. And then they would come down writing programs for the coaches, helping them and getting them into an alignment with a schedule. Then when I took on, it started in Miami, Adam Gase was good at this. He actually built into the calendar at least 30 minutes of exercise multiple days throughout the week. So coaches, assistant coaches were not allowed to be in their office during that window. So that meant it didn't mean you had to come down to the weight room. A lot of them did, but it meant you had to get up, either go take a walk, take laps around the field, go outside, walk and call your wife or FaceTime with your kids. Come down, get a workout with the strength and conditioning staff. So I took that when I went to LA. We actually started designing staff workouts. We would do it weekly, but then we would have these mini workouts that we designed. So every day we'd write up a new workout for the coaching staff. And by the end of it, I think we probably had 80% of our coaching staff at least participating in every workout. So that was something I took to Philadelphia, because the side benefit of that too, I started to see the connection of the group. Like, I've seen the closest staffs I've ever been a part of that work out together, because
Yep.
it's more organic time together. We're struggling together. We're doing difficult things together. We're overcoming, we're achieving. And that's what brings everybody together. So seeing that, Justin, it was awesome, because then I started to really understand that. And then when we kept that habit up through the season, we felt better. Our staff maintained their health better. There was a time in LA, we're doing yoga on Tuesdays, which is a heavy
Nice.
game plan day at 5:15 a.m., hot yoga for an hour before we even go to the office. And we get most of the staff there every single week. And then we're
That's
still doing
awesome.
the other workouts throughout the course of the week. So going through those things and seeing the impact it had on their health, mentally and physically, that's one of the best sales that I've ever seen. So I would recommend that to every coach, every strength coach, every head football coach, whatever sport you're dealing with. Build in, I don't want to call it mandatory, but build
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that time
yeah.
for your staff, because it gives them that guilt-free time where, hey, my boss said I can't be in my office. Cool, I'm going to go get my workout in during this time. It makes it okay. It makes it allowable.
And anybody listening to that, like, to me, hearing that, you could, if they really wanted to be obsessive, like, it's not like they're going to not talk about ball when they're down there, right? So it's almost like
Yes.
an impromptu staff meeting where they might have an idea that free flows when they're in there. Like, wait a minute, now that they can see it, they're like, all right, if they're going to play that tight five, we can do this to the linebacker, and then we can, like, and you can just start having these organic ideas. And then if you're down there lifting with them as a strength coach, you hear that. So you're starting to understand what they're seeing. And then, oh, okay, well, if you need that, tackle to chip the five and work up to the linebacker, you probably need him, like, he needs to not just be a big mauler, he has to be athletic. So what if we started doing these drills? And it all seems so pure and organic if you did it that way.
Well, you bring down natural defenses when you're working out, when you're in the middle of exercising and things like that. So the organic conversations will blend into work. You can have that integration. When I look back, I love this time, because when Sean and I started working out together, we would work out and we would have conversations about life, about books we're reading, podcasts we're listening to, the things that help both of us become better versions of ourselves. But we would also go into the team. Hey, who needs loved up today? Who's going through stuff? This guy's going through this stress. How do we go into this and how do we build him up? And we actually fixed problems with the team during that time. So I think there's organic ways to do that.
Yeah, go get it. My youngest son just asked a question. Sorry about that.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I
I
heard,
love it.
hearing you say that though, mate, like when I was at Iowa, Doyle and Coach Ferentz would train together all the time. And like,
Yep.
you would kind of hear them talking about things, talking about life. And like, if we're lifting too, like, they would obviously talk to us too about those things, but, seeing that impact. And I used to do that with, one of the wide receivers coach when I was at Maryland, Coach Hull. And like, just again, the power of when you can have those relationships, like, so that the reason that we keep saying that is anybody that's listening, like, find ways to do that. And I really like what you said there about like the mandatory team staff lift. Like, if you're listening to this right now, maybe it's just something that you suggest to the head coach, right? This is a little bit of that downtime. Maybe they're gone, and shoot, you might be able, it's like when you raise your hand at a conference or you ask that question that other people are thinking. Maybe the staff has been wanting to exercise and now you just give them that opportunity to do it.
You make it okay. Once you make it okay from the top down, and I'll say this too, I think the other benefit, you don't do it just for this, but when the team sees that, when we've had
Ooh,
players walk in the middle of a workout and they're like, what is going on? They see 30 people getting after it and they're sweating, we're crushing it. And they're like, you guys do, I say, we do this every day. And they're like, for real? Then they see that connectedness. You don't think that player's going to buy in a little bit more when they know the staff is together? Oh, that's a cool side benefit.
you know what's also funny too, hearing you say that reminded me back when the coach, so we would do GPP with the non-travel players on Friday after we did our Fast Friday practice. So everybody that is going to play, they're showering, going to eat, and then the players that are going to stick around or not play on Saturday, we'd get some GPP work with them so they'd be able to stay in shape. And oftentimes, some of the defensive and offensive coach would be like, "Hey, leave some of that out for me to do it." and the players would be watching them train and like hearing the players saying to the position coaches like some of the same things that we would say to them in terms of like, oh, this is an entry level lift or this is simple. Like it was super funny, but it you had that close knit, that bondedness, you know.
Connecting. It's connecting. And what do you need to do on a team? You need to build ways to connect, and ultimately that's going to build the team even stronger, and that's going to help.
What have been some of the best team building, team bonding things that you've seen in your career that actually works? That's not a gimmick. It's something that is kind of tried and true that you're like, no, I hang my hat on this, and it's been a very good way that we've built camaraderie and togetherness.
Bringing competition in, and I think college has done this, I think, at a really good level for a long time. I've seen some really cool stuff. I've talked to some people who have done it and learned a lot of cool drills. So we've established that. We've started to bring in competition to the weight room, specifically during the off season, where we're bringing guys together and we're pitting Jason Kelsey against Brandon Graham, and you guys are going
Mm.
for a half mile on the sprint bike and they're crushing it, or we're turning it into a relay where we're getting our key leaders involved, offense versus defense, or intermixed skills versus mids versus bigs, and finding ways to blend that naturally. Because I think two things happen. Number one, it's organic. It fits within the context. We're getting good, hard physical work done. But then they're seeing the leaders of the team struggling, lifting each other up. They're motivating them because, once again, there's no rank to anything within a team. We need every player to contribute. So seeing that, you get both sides, but that natural camaraderie that comes from that. And then there's other times it's not just hard physical stuff. I brought in stuff. We have a pop a shot in the weight room. We brought in other things to where
That's
you
awesome.
have guys, but you're eliciting competition. I think competition bleeds into that connection too, because when you do that, guys come together. They're talking smack against each
Yeah.
other. They're playing pool or whatever it is. So we've tried to introduce all those concepts within it. That naturally, organically helps. And then the other one is getting people outside of the structure of work. So for us, when we have those family barbecue events, when we have inviting the kids, inviting the wives, the spouses, getting everyone together, because I think two things happen again. Everyone sees, players see the coaches and the humanity side of it. Oh, that's your wife and your kids. Okay, now I get a better grasp for seeing you as a dad in that moment and seeing how you care about your kids and love your kids. You kind of bring down that wall a little bit more, and then you can have organic conversations about things outside of life. Then the players will open up and vice versa. Oh, how many siblings do you have? I have five. What are they all doing? You start to learn and you start to ask deeper questions to really build that foundational relationship better, and that brings the team closer together too.
Are you or your athletes waking up too hot or too cold in the middle of the night? Or are you looking for a sleep tracker option that doesn't involve wearing a ring or a wrist or a watch, something on your body? Then you need to look no further than the company Sleep Me. Sleep Me makes chili pads, which keep your bed cold or warm depending on what you want. And they also have a tracker that will go underneath that pad so it will be able to tell how well you slept. When I did a little study on myself with the Aura Ring and with the Sleep Me tracker, they were within 97% of each other, and it was actually pretty astonishing how similar the two were. I love my chili pad. It makes me sleep great. I sleep cold. I actually wake up cold now. I haven't woke up warm. And pretty much ever since I've had it, I don't like sleeping on the road because I don't have the ability to use my chili pad. Bunch of former colleagues back at Towson got it. My stepmother got it. Check it out in the link down below. Yeah, amen to that. And you saying that, have you ever done any of this? And we briefly introduced it, but I heard at the conference some people are going to do something similar, where like in the off time or the rest period of some conditioning, not the interset or not the interrep, interset stuff, doing some like problem solving skills where the team has to like talk and do like math problems or simple things, but it's getting them to communicate and work together and like solving puzzles of that nature.
We haven't done it within, and that's really interesting because there's some benefit there where you're actually provoking some problem solutions and some things while they're in a fatigue state. I love that. We've done it in more of a setting where you bring the players and the coaches together and you bring in an outside expert and they're teaching you communication or problem solving together, similar, but not within the context of when they're physiologically tired and they're
Yeah.
recovering. I like that because what's more applicable to a game or a competition where you got to adjust, you got to figure out things, you have to see patterns, pattern recognition. That's pretty cool that they've done it like that. I love that idea.
Yeah, I forget who I heard it from, but it was at the CSCCA conference last week. And somebody was like, "Yeah, we're going to introduce this. Like, we experimented with it, and now we're going to be able to full fledgedly do it during our rest intervals." And they're like, "We're curious to see if the players subjectively say that the session was harder because now instead of just a pure break, they're not physically exerting themselves, but now they're having to think, and they're like, we wonder if the stress anywhere will lead to stress everywhere, and they feel like the session itself is harder, even though the work was the same."
For sure. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to hear more. Let me know. Let me know what you hear about it.
One of the last questions that I have for you, because I want to respect your time, is you have your cross pendant right there, and you talk about it on social media. I've grown more in my faith over the last 2.5 years. Is that something that has always been on the forefront of your mind? How have you addressed slash handled that for anybody that is either going along in their faith journey as well?
I love it, man. And I appreciate it. I've grown up in a religious setting. My parents were great. I think I was just talking to my wife about this. My parents they didn't force me to go to church. It wasn't like this every Sunday thing, especially when I was younger. But as I kind of got to middle school and specifically high school, it was one of those things where I said, "Hey, mom, dad, we're going to church, right?" And I just kind of took it on myself. And then as my faith kind of grew through high school, through college, I think as you go through life, then you inevitably come into stress or you come into adversity, and having that foundation to lean on. I know me personally, it's helped me tremendously because some of the things I've talked about, I just posted because my stroke anniversary was May 7th. I had a
Oh
stroke a
yeah.
few years ago. In going through life-changing events like that, not having that faith, I don't know how I would have been able to not just get through it, but be able to maximize that time and that stress and that adversity. Once again, seeing it as an obstacle or an opportunity, having my faith in God, He teaches everything in the Bible that applies to, hey, when you do struggle, trust in this. All you have to do is focus on the process, take the next step forward. And having that setting and that foundation has helped me immensely, but it's also helped me have compassion, empathy, grace when other people are going through things, maybe not snap judgment like, oh, why'd that person do
Mm.
this? But once again, detaching, taking a step back, trying to apply empathy to the situation, truly see it from their perspective. That's helped me avoid further conflict. That's helped me develop closer relationships with players, with coaches, with people I've interacted with. So I think it's been the foundation for everything that I've been able to accomplish and hopefully continue to accomplish. If I didn't have that, man, I wouldn't have anything to lean on.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I used to go through I mean, I'm down here in my office and I've got books galore. And it's like, used to read all the newest self-help book to leadership and development. And now being in year 2 of rereading through the whole Holy Bible in a year, Old Testament and New Testament, it's like one of my personal training clients who was a former minor league baseball player. I remember him talking at one of his business meetings was like, listen, I don't need to read those books on leadership. He's like, I've literally have read the Bible every year from cover to cover. And those, like, it's in the Bible, like it's right there for you. So I'm just kind of echoing that, and then curious, like for you, are you still reading those? And there's nothing wrong with reading those books. You can still glean things from them, but just hearing the messages from the different books of the Bible has definitely made it streamlined where I can read more research papers or instead of the leadership type books.
Yeah, I still do both. I start my day with scripture. For me, to me, it's almost that psychological component where I get up out of bed as fast as possible. And the first thing I
Same.
do, I'm reading scripture.
Yep.
Once I read scripture, then I'll transition to something because I do think there's benefit. I still gain some benefit towards seeing how people look at things. So for me, those self-help books or those leadership specific books, I'm curious. I want to know, like, how does John Gordon look at this problem, or how does Ryan Hawks, a good friend, how does he look at this problem and establish this? I just start super communicators. I think we can all learn how to communicate better. Whether I'm communicating my beliefs from the Bible or from a biblical standpoint, I can communicate better. If I'm talking to an athlete, I definitely can communicate better. So I think I still derive benefit from those things. But the first thing I do is always keeping the main thing the main thing. That's going to be scripture first. Everything else should funnel off of that. Everything else should build on top of that foundation.
You talked about the stroke, and I forgot about that. How terrifying! Like, just kind of speak about that. What were some of the things that you learned? I mean, you're a healthy strength and conditioning coach. How did that happen?
Yeah, I had zero risk factors basically, but through the process found a hole in my heart, which I never knew I had, a genetic issue. So it was called a PFO, patent foraminal valley. Similar, like David Goggins, a lot of people have read Goggins. He had something similar. So I've had heart surgery since. I have a full human heart now. I'm good. So going through that process, the vivid picture I always come back to, I was in the ICU and I couldn't talk, had lost the ability to speak. Thank God they got the clot buster in me within the time frame. There's like a 2-hour window, I think is what it is. So thank God avoided major long-term stuff. But you go through the window where everything hits. I get to the hospital, can't talk anything. And then you realize there's like 10, 15 people in the room, doctors, nurses. That's not usually a good thing. But then when I finally was in the ICU, early stages of recovery, still not able to speak. My wife was there. Seeing her face was not a fun experience, knowing her worry and things like that. But then watching a priest walk by in the intensive care unit, when you're laying there as a young 30-year-old and not able to speak with 3 young kids at home, that vision, number one, you want to gain gratitude or an appreciation for life. That's something that I can reflect on very often. And that's something that's had a profound impact on me. Once again, getting back to, do I have better empathy and better understanding for other people? Absolutely right, because I went through that experience. Can I relate to other people better now? Yeah. If I look at it once again from the positive side, I wouldn't choose to go through it. God wanted me to go through it. I've learned more about our medical system. I've learned more about stroke prevention. So hopefully now that's going to allow me, maybe I can prevent a stroke for somebody. If I can do that, that's well worth me going through that experience. If I can help someone, hopefully save that experience, then that's well worth it for me. So gaining that appreciation, the gratitude, that it was life changing. There's no question about it. But going through that process, I take everything that I can from it, lean into it, and I'm going to learn and grow from it.
Dude, there's so much power from here. Like there is no better place to end that interview than right there. Thank you for your time. That's phenomenal that you're healthy. Godspeed to you for that. And thank you for coming on and sharing with us for the last hour.
Justin, I really appreciate you, man. Keep doing what you're doing. You're having a huge impact. I appreciate you. God bless.
Thanks, man. Keeping your certification is essential to staying hired as a strength and conditioning coach. Both of our long form courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, offer CEUs to the NSCA, the NCSF, as well as the ASCA professional development points. Click the link down below to learn more about our education courses, which are both over 20 hours long and allow you to learn from some of the best practitioners in the field of strength and conditioning.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.